Turning to White House foreign policy, now critics say that President Biden is not doing enough to combat the cyber attacks by aggressors like Russia and China. So joining us now to discuss a little bit more about this, we want to bring in Yahoo News editor-in-chief Dan Klaidman. And Dan, Biden's policy towards China specifically really coming into focus, especially this week on the heels of the cyber attack on Microsoft. But I'm curious just to get your take on his approach to foreign policy so far and what he's done in order to counter some of these cyber attacks from China and from Russia.
Well, the cyber and ransomware challenge is huge for this administration. It's been a problem for a long time. We're seeing it's getting worse and worse. It could have a tremendous impact on our economy and national security more generally. And I think that the Biden administration has realized that it's going to have to get bolder and, frankly, take some more risks. And that means that they're going to have to, I think, get more offensive-minded in their cyber strategy, not just play defense. And that is risky because that means there's a possibility for a kind of a tit-for-tat escalation that could spin out of control. And remember, the United States is more vulnerable than any other nation because we are the most digitally connected nation in the world. And beyond that, much of our critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector, which gives the government less leverage. The interesting thing that happened in the wake of the Chinese attack on Microsoft servers and the Microsoft email system is that the Biden administration, they did not impose sanctions on the Chinese, but they called them out. And what they did was they rallied their allies and partners, particularly the European Union and NATO for the first time, to call out the Chinese for what they did. That's important because it suggests a kind of multilateral approach consistent with Biden's, his more general approach toward foreign policy. But getting our allies behind us is really the only way that the United States is going to be effective against the Chinese.
Dan, we're talking about a 21st century issue, but there's an old-fashioned issue, and the withdrawal of the troops from Afghanistan is part of that because we need to have our military forces ready. I don't want to say in case something happens with Taiwan, but the president's alluded to those kinds of things, hasn't he?
It really is exactly that. I mean, it's broader than that. Successive administrations, including the previous administration, the Trump administration, have desperately wanted to get out of the quicksand of the Middle East and pivot toward Asia because everyone knows that our economic interests and our national security interests lie there, perhaps more than anywhere else. With China rising, I mean, China will, as you guys know, will surpass the United States as the premier economic power in the world in 10 years. And so there is no time to lose here. And, look, the problem is that the Middle East always kind of sucks you back in. You've got the possibility of a terrorist attack that could always happen. And you've got Iran that remains a real threat to our national security. But the Biden administration made the decision. This is something that Joe Biden, I think, has believed in for quite some time, that 20 years in Afghanistan was enough. We're about to have the 20th anniversary of September 11th attacks, and that it was time to do this. By the way, there are also domestic political considerations as well. This has not been a popular war. 2,500 American troops died there, 20,000 wounded, and tens of billions of American treasure that we've spent there. So that was a consideration as well.
Dan, I know another issue that you're closely been tracking has been the division that we're seeing within the Democratic Party over the past 6 months, the first 6 months of President Biden in the White House. We even heard it earlier this hour. Congressman DeFazio, he was basically saying that he's not happy with the bipartisan infrastructure deal that so many of the Democrats are pushing at this point. I guess, what does President Biden need to do going forward in order to successfully deal with some of the division that we're seeing within the Democratic Party?
Well, this was always going to be tough for Joe Biden. And I actually think he's succeeded far better than most people would have expected up until this point. It was always going to be very tricky to kind of keep this coalition together. I think he was smart by coming out very quickly with that very significant COVID relief package that had a lot of things that progressives in the Democratic Party wanted, including the child tax credit. And so that gave him a little bit of capital moving forward, but it gets tougher and tougher as he goes along. I think if they can pull off this kind of two-step dance here and get the sort of hard infrastructure bill passed, which I know is looking more and more tenuous, then he's going to be able to have a much better chance of getting the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill passed. And that one, if he does get that passed, he will be a hero to progressives, and I think he will do just fine with moderates. That legislation, he will be the sort of the FDR of the modern era, and so but that's still we just have to see what's going to happen. It's going to be tough. So far, so good. I noticed, by the way, that in when he had the meeting with the Democratic caucus on the hard infrastructure bill, he got 3 standing ovations in that meeting, and that was not just moderates; it was progressives as well.
Dan Klaidman is the Yahoo News editor-in-chief. Thank you for joining us, Dan. All the best to you.